Ahead and give it to Milt.
Hi, and I just put up something to share. Can you see that on your screen?
Yes.
Co-creating a sustainable future.
Mm-hmm. See it.
Okay. Um, so welcome everyone. I don't know any of you, but I'm Milt Markewitz, and Andrea and I have known each other, as she said, for I guess probably at least 30 years.
It's been a long time now.
And
Yeah.
I was knee deep into interfaith work. My father taught comparative religions. I'm Jewish by birth, and he taught them at a Jewish temple in Portland. Um, and so I was kind of raised on that. So today we're going to talk about spirituality obscured and reawakened. Um, and so I wanted to share with you a very short video. I'll probably just show a couple minutes of it, of asking the right questions, or maybe I'll skip it. It's Ilarion Merkuliev, who is an elder. He is a mentor of mine and a dear friend. Um, and I'll just talk about this instead of showing the video. What Ilarion says in there, first of all, I should introduce Ilarion is Unangan, which is Alaskan. He comes from the Bering Sea, an island.
Very quickly, Milt, can you make that full screen your presentation by any chance?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm pushing full screen, but it's not doing anything. So
Then I think we'll just have to run with what we got.
um, I got too many things up here. You got record. Let me do the view and see if it opens up.
Try slideshow.
I'm just going to try to. Oh, it's too big. There's slideshow, but it's too big.
If you go back to view and make it 100%, that might be about right.
Yeah. Well,
We'll just go with what we got. It's all good.
it's as big as it's going to get there, I think, unless I.
It's all good.
How about that?
That's
That better? So Ilarion is from the St. Paul Island in the Bering Sea. He's Unangan. He was an, acknowledged as an elder when he was 4 years old and given the name of Kuyak. And there is one Kuyak in the world, selected one Unangan person. And their job is to take the indigenous message and take it out to the world. And so the video that I was going to show, but I'll just talk to, and then we'll use some of Valerion's work, is asking the right questions. And the first question is, what have we wrought? What have we wrought? And the second question is, very important, is what is the root cause? Not any superficial kinds of things, but what is the root cause? And we'll talk about that. And the third question is, shouldn't we be looking at ourselves? So I'm going to go forth with that and just say welcome and gratitude. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, each person that's on the call. Thank you, Zoom people, for making this possible. And see if we can't just kind of settle into our seats, have a quiet moment. Because I think each of us on the call, if you're friends of Andrea, have experienced mysteries about life, why it flourishes and why it thrives. And we probably each understand the limitations of Newtonian science, this closed system, that the science that is most used, and have some clarity about the quantum reality that we live in, the open system. And my question really is, where does this quantum understanding of the world kind of give us what we need to know, but the rest is mystery? Where does that mystery begin? And what are the fundamental truths about life? are knowing for which there's no apparent scientific explanation. So I'd like each of you to just take a minute or so and reflect on what comes up for you, some truth for which you accept the mystery. Let's just sit quietly, ponder that, and I think the question or the response to it will come up as we speak. So I think what I want to open with you is how many of you are familiar with the Hopi petroglyphic, that document that I'm showing here? Is that familiar to all of you?
Nope.
It's thought to be about 3,000 years old. It's from the Hopi people in Arizona. It's a picture that's on a rock. It's been, was cut into a rock. It's quite a popular understanding of it. Now, the bottom horizontal line is the native people. It's probably not that flat. It's probably a little up and down as it goes there. It's a homeostasis world where things may get a little out of balance, but they're brought back in. And it's the way they have lived for tens of thousands of years on the earth, very, very successfully. They live in creation's balance and harmony. They've survived and flourished. And they recognize the basic understanding that the earth will always provide as long as we meet our mutual responsibilities, our stewardship and mutuality there. And what they show that's so important here is people are separating from that culture and they're entering into a different culture, a culture which is dominated by a patriarchal, colonizing empire way of being. It's so this is this double sloping line here. And any improvements that are made seem to be offset, more than offset, by waste and destruction. So what I think we're actually seeing is an exponential curve that moves up like this, but of course at the time, it's right there. Many hundreds of years, probably a couple thousands of years after they initially drew this, the Hopi and others like the Mayan, the Incan people prophesized. And they said that nature's going to respond to climate change, and there'll be extinctions, and there'll be social injustices and conflicts and trauma, and we are seeing all of that right now. And one of the interesting things about this prophecy is that they nailed it. They'd said when it was going to happen, like which generation, our generation. It seems to be on steroids. And they also gave us a teaching. The Hopi teaching is that cultural transformation requires embodying a new consciousness. So when we work with the indigenous people, and when you're in your element of interfaith and other faiths, I think there is an understanding that in the colonial Western world, we really don't embody. We listen, we learn enough to pass tests, but we don't actually go through an experiential embodiment process to learn. And so I know where I'm living right now, which is a facility of almost 500 very elderly people, most of whom have advanced degrees and have been very successful in life and so forth. It's very hard for them to change. It's very hard for them to think that these people of a different color, coming from a different tribe, tribal way, word tribal, often called primitive, sometimes called savages, could possibly know more than we do. And yet I looked it up, and there's been no biological change in humans in 40 to 50,000 years. Those people that have lived in balance and harmony have the same basic brain size that All of us do. So here's something that Ilarion wrote, and it's a kind of something that I've taken to heart. In these prophetic times where human beings are pushing Mother Earth's life support systems to the brink, it is imperative to do whatever is possible to elevate human consciousness. We must heal separation from self, from other, and Mother Earth. This separation is the root cause for all the human dysfunctions that are destroying Mother Earth and ourselves. And I have taken that to heart. And in the work that I've done, it's kind of a transition here right now. I ended up in a situation where I really had to understand what brings life. Why does it flourish? Why does it thrive? And the situation was this. I was asked to go to dinner by a friend of mine from when I was working for IBM and he was working for Tektronix. And he gave me an article on the consciousness of all life by Willis Harman. Willis Harman was with IONS, Institute of Noetic Science. And it was on the consciousness of all life. And he asked me what I thought about it. And I said, it resonates totally. I absolutely believe there's a consciousness in all life. And with that, he shared his idea for changing how the world would feed itself. He wanted to get away from these big collective farms and have people have garden pods. And they weren't going to be too big, too much, probably about the size of a dining room table or something, if round, big round dining room table. And we worked out the technology and the production method and what kind of a culture we want and financing. And he wanted to be able to say when we had gone through some stages of development that we would produce, or you would produce, enough nourishing food daily to feed your family out of this garden pod. So after 2 years of working with him, I had worked seriously with the engineer. We developed our culture. We were staffing. We had $2.5 million of seed money. And I said to my friend, I have to leave now. I can't make this commitment that you can feed your family nourishing food every day because I don't understand why life flourishes and I got to figure it out. And I took a two-pronged approach to it. I have always, in my work world with IBM, listened to other cultures, how they think, the language they speak, all of that affects how they design, how they implement, what their quality ethic and all their other ethics are. I was particularly taken with the Native Americans. And I got involved with the American Indian Institute. We'd have gatherings of 35 or 40 white people or people non-native like myself, and they'd have 15 or 20 elders. And we would just go through ceremony and talk and just be in relationship. That was absolutely beautiful. And I also got very involved with the Earth and Spirit Council in Portland, and we would bring speakers, guest speakers, to Portland. And in fact, Ilarion was one of those guest speakers. That was where I met him for the first time. And in parallel with that, I was doing one other thing, and I'll mention a third thing I was doing that'll come up. But I knew that I needed to go back to school, but I had to find the right program because I certainly hadn't found it at Portland State where I wanted to do my work. And I talked with a dear friend of mine who was a professor, and she said, I know the system that you need, and I know the advisor that you should have, and I will introduce you. And it worked out. And I went to Antioch, and I took their master's program in whole systems design, and all of my focus was on living systems. All I could. Every once in a while, they made me do something else, but basically it was living systems. And in the end of that 2-year period, towards the end, a small group of us co-taught the cohort, Living Systems, with Dr. Fridtjof Capra. Many of you, I think, know him. He wrote The Web of Life, The Tao of Physics. He's been a leader in this work for ages. And what I was talking about, when I talked about living systems, what I gleaned from all I'd studied and so forth was that they cleanse and they heal and they restructure so that life will flourish. And they self-organize, which is very important. They actually have an intelligence. And that's a big jump for some people, but there is intelligence and they adjust and adapt all the time. And what Friedhoff shared with us and emphasized was that all life is endowed with gifts, that if you look into nature, there are gifts everywhere. And I mentioned here, there's perfect order, there's always possibility, there's love. Things love each other, they connect with what they need, they know what they need, and it's really beautiful. And I was studying also, the third thing I was doing was studying ancient languages. I was studying this book, The Cipher of Genesis. This is the original code of the Kabbalah as applied to the scriptures. And on this particular page, what I thought of when Friedhoff shared what he shared with us was that the author had touted this as a living language. And I wondered, will I see this language in the book? And lo and behold, there is a chart, and I'm not going to go through it with you, but there are 27 characters.
Hey, will you turn on the TV and, oh, never mind, I'll do it.
There are 27 characters, there are 9 columns, and each of the 9 columns is a gift of nature. That's embedded in the language. And I'll share more with you in a moment about that and how I teach that. So this is a living language example. I just made up this chart, but you can see that this is taken really from simplifying the chart that was in the book there, that for every life process that's a gift, like we are all part of a life-death continuum. We are raised from the energies of the what is passed before us. And there are 3 basic energies associated with that are all expressed in the language. One, in this row right here, the bottom row, excuse me, is a cosmological force. I don't think we understand the science for this, but it's the cosmological force which creates this endowment. And this line right here is what nurtures that endowment. And this line here is the existential energies that we feel, what we sense when that particular endowment is in play. So the 9 endowments are the life-death continuum. We're granted perfect order. There's 0 waste in nature. There's an organic life. Each of us, each species can produce its own with integrity. It's amazing the way how every oak tree looks like every oak tree and comes from that little acorn. There's birth with resistance. So we're always building up resilience. And this not only happens with what we birth with children or new trees or whatever, it happens with every idea that comes about, the learning we do. We are birthing something new. And there's universal life. So now things know what they're dependent on, and they are in this dance together. It's the natural laws of interdependence. And everything is fertilized. It's incredible. And I know you've all thought about this, the importance of water and soil and air and the sun. They are all fertilizing life in one way or another. And this is one that I think is a little difficult for us, is possibility. It's a karmic existence. It's not deterministic. That nature is changing as we change and impact it. And there's energy. There's energy in every conversation, every transaction. And there's an attraction. And someone asked me, what do you think of this column? What do you call it? I think it's love. That there has to be something like love. So what I did was I've taken this to schools, not the language per se, but I'll share with you what I take to them. And it's based on this work that was done in Portland in the early 90s. There was a conference on systems thinking and sustainability. And the keynote speaker was a gentleman named Tom Gladwin. He's from the University of Michigan. And he's a professor in environmental studies. He's now professor emeritus. And what he did was he gave the keynote at this conference, and then he gave us a test. And the test had nothing to do with the keynote per se. It was whenever he went out to speak, he spoke primarily to sustainability type people and to business people. And he gave them these 40 questions, 20 of, do you think mechanically or organically? And is your worldview one of scarcity or one of abundance? And the results from that quiz ended up consistently that sustainability people ended up in this upper right-hand quadrant, scared to death that there wasn't enough water, soil, there wouldn't be enough food, and so forth. But organically, what he meant was that they would deal with it compassionately. They would learn to share. They would be kind to each other. Okay? And the business people always ended up here. They thought the world was abundant, and abundant for them meant they could take and take and take. And they would deal with it mechanically, they would make money, they would be happy. And I had a lot of dissonance with this chart, a lot of dissonance. I was a sustainability guy through and through, and I did not belong in that upper quadrant. And so I studied his questions. And just as I just mentioned to you, that organic to him meant compassionate, kind, sharing. And compassionate for me, or organic for me, meant something far more than that. It included all those things, but it was a systemic understanding of the way life worked. If you poison the ocean and it poisons the food that the animals eat in there, when we eat those animals, we will be poisoned. And that is the kind of cycle. The water cycle would be changed, everything. And also, my understanding of abundance wasn't that you could take and take and take, but that the earth would always provide as long as you met your mutual responsibilities. So I share that with kids. I was allowed or whatever. I got to be a guest faculty in the Cleveland High School district, but it was primarily at Brooklyn School, 4th and 5th graders. And I would teach them that the organic systems are cleansing and healing and restructuring. They're self-organizing. There's intelligence, there emerges, and they do all this so life will flourish. And that there's a sufficient abundance that I just mentioned, that the earth will always provide as long as you meet your responsibilities. And then I shared with him Friedrich Kopper's language endowments, and I went through these. And I said, in addition to those endowments, what the Cree language has is a gratitude, awe, wonder, beauty, and wisdom have symbols. It's symbolic language, just like the ancient Hebrew is not alphabetic, it's symbolic. And so now when people are speaking it, every utterance is about life. Every word tends to be a story, one that people can gather the essence of, to kind of gather around, gather their values, but also can think about and take out into their own way of thinking. And the Cree language was given to me by a woman. She shared with me the tapes, Yvonne Vazina. You may know her. She's Matisse. When I shared with her the ancient Hebrew, before she shared this with me, she started crying. She said, you feel the same energy we feel when we speak our language. And it's amazing to me that we have the same endowments expressed in our language. The Hebrew is expressed through this cosmological energy, this process energy of nurturing, and the energy we feel. This is expressed in a very relational way, a very holistic way, but it's the same energy, and I think that's what we feel. And I think both languages, both approaches get to the same place. And we're not going to spend time on that today, but it's very interesting that they share the same energy and they get there in different ways. So what I do with the kids is we come back together and I said, you guys got that? You understand it? They go, yeah, yeah, yeah. They're quick, smart kids. And I said, well, I changed the graphic that just had two quadrants filled. And I made this upper right one, the social justice perspective. And I added this. I put a warring, colonizing perspective up here. Those that see scarcity often not real, just perceive scarcity, and they got the biggest guns and they go after it. And I added the earth-based perspective down here. And then I say to the kids, we just go around here and just think about it all. Which of these four quadrants best describes who you're being today? And they almost all end up here. That's who we are in our communities. And I say, well, who are your parents? Which quadrant best describes them? And then almost all of them come down here. And I say, well, if you had to pick a quadrant that represented the country, where would you go? And they were right here, especially when like the Iraqi war was going on, so on and so forth. They see us as conflicting. And I think that if we did it today, that's absolutely where they'd be. And then I tell them, okay, you guys are going to graduate. You're going to, each year that you go further, you're honing what you're going to do in your life work. Which of these four quadrants best represents your life work? And now, sometimes, and I think the first class I did, it was unanimous. They came down here. It was amazing. And in a later time that I was talking about this, Matthew Fox mentioned to me, well, Milt, this guy, and this guy are all Western-based knowledge constructs. This is a wisdom construct. So what the kids kind of understand is we need to move from mechanical to organic, but it's systemic. We need to move from scarcity to abundance, but it's a sufficient abundance. And we need to shift this wisdom culture into the other three. And they can see that as, in some ways, their life work. So the feedback I got on that was incredible. There was a big, long piece of feedback. I just picked out one little piece of it. A student named, this is when I did it in the high school, and I don't know how many guest faculty there were, but a student named Natural Systems Thinking. I thought that was beautiful. I hadn't named it Natural Systems Thinking, but the kids did. As the most powerful. He described after reading Ishmael, he felt discouraged, like we are all damned if we do and damned if we don't. Systems thinking provided him a strategy to respond to the challenges of the world. And I think there's a sense of hope that comes with that. And also, when I showed this to the principal of the Portland NAIA, the Native American school, K through 12 school, he said, we already know that. That really helped me to understand that there were other people that knew it. And as I, reflected on that, I think what I recognized more and more, they didn't know it because somebody stood up in front of them and taught it the way we teach. They experienced it. And when I showed it to the native director of the Northwest Indian Health Board, he said, I'm going to file that under mechanical, which I thought was great. I think, he could have said, I would file that under academic or whatever. But what I want to do as I kind of wind down here tonight is look at the sacred bond. Knowing that you love the earth changes you, activates you to defend and protect and celebrate. And when you feel that the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relationship from a one-way street into a sacred bond. And I think this is what it's all about. Isn't this the knowing that earth will always provide as long as our needs and we meet our stewardship responsibilities? And isn't this embodied by people of varying universally, whether it's the language they speak, whether they are just mystics, not just, but mystics in the true sense, those who connected with the land and all life. So I think this sacred bond has been severely obscured by empire and colonization. And I want to mention to you, I only have a couple minutes really to spend, so I won't spend a lot of time, but I would encourage each of you to go to YouTube and look at Yakawana. It is the story of the 1992 First Environmental World Summit. in Rio de Janeiro, and the indigenous people were given 5 minutes on the agenda. And instead of throwing up their hands, what they did is they brought just under 1,000 shamanic leaders to Rio a week before the conference. And they spent the first time sharing their dances, their songs, their stories, and so forth, developed the relationship they knew they could build. And they spent the last 3 days, 2 to 3 days, developing their talk and picking their speaker. And their speaker, a gentleman named Marcus Torino, said this as part of what he said. This life code that no scientist has ever managed to unveil rests with the Indians. You don't have to look any farther. Are you prepared for that? Is the contemporary world prepared for what we want to convey after 500 years? And I honestly believe hardly anyone was listening then, and they're just barely listening now. So in summary, aren't the sacred bond and life code one and the same? I think maybe he used the wrong word. Maybe everybody there thought, oh, life code, I understand that. Aren't they embodied by the mystics all over the world? And how might we recreate this Yakuano effect among all mystical creations? So I think in the end, what we really need to come to is that we flow with nature. We flow with nature in a way where nature becomes our ally, and it improves our process as we go. That there, in the language, I didn't share this, there is a connection between what we feel on the earth and the cosmic forces that are mysterious, I think, but are definitely in play. So in closing, I'd like to thank all of you, Andrea, each of you on the call. I don't know any of you, but I feel like we're friends now. I'd like you to because next month our topic is embodying spirituality, reflect on today's slides, and I'm so glad you've recorded this, Andrea. And so if new people attend, please share with them what we're doing, what more can we do to create the sacred bond, to know that the earth loves us, and it's our responsibility to be in this mutual stewardship relationship. And then figure out how best to participate in sharing the wisdom of the mystics.